Oh, hello! Welcome to Module 3 on Discourse and Pragmatics. In this module, we will be talking about speech acts, contexts, politeness, and implicatures. As a subject, Discourse and Pragmatics looks at the relationship between language and context. It also looks at ways in which people typically perform speech acts in spoken and written discourse, and the reasons we choose to perform a speech act in a particular way. Pragmatics is a branch of linguistics concerned with the use of language in social contexts and the ways in which people produce and comprehend meanings through language. It studies how people comprehend and produce a communicative act or speech act in a concrete speech situation, which is usually a conversation. An understanding of how language functions in context is important to an understanding of the relationship between what is said and what is understood in spoken and written discourse. The context of situation of what someone says is, therefore, crucial to understanding and interpreting the meaning of what is being said. This includes the physical context, the social context, and the mental worlds and roles of the people involved in the interaction. Each of these impacts on what we say and how other people interpret what we say in spoken and written discourse. A conversation between two people in a restaurant may mean different things to the actual people speaking, something different to a side participant in the conversation, something different to a bystander, and again, something different to someone who may be eavesdropping the conversation. In the production and interpretation of discourse, we need to consider the situational context in terms of what people know about what they can see around them, the background knowledge context in terms of what people know about each other and the world, and the contextual context in terms of what people know about what they have been saying. Background knowledge context includes cultural knowledge and interpersonal knowledge, like what people know about the world, what they know about various areas of life, what they know about each other, and what they know about the norms and expectations of the particular discourse community in which the communication is taking place. Contextual knowledge also includes social, political, and cultural understandings that are relevant to the particular communication. Therefore, meaning is not something that is inherent in the words alone, nor is it produced by the speaker alone or the hearer alone. Making meaning is a dynamic process involving the negotiation of meaning between speaker and hearer, the context of utterance, and the meaning potential of an utterance. Meaning, thus, is produced in interaction. It is jointly accomplished by both speaker and the listener, or the writer and their reader. It involves social, psychological, and cognitive factors that are relevant to the production and interpretation of what a speaker says and what a hearer understands by what is said. Now, let us look at the first concept we need to discuss, that is speech acts. A speech act, according to J.L. Austin, is an utterance that has performative function in language and communication. To expand this concept, Searle has set up the following classification of illocutionary speech acts, and these are representatives, directives, commissives, expressives, and declarations. First, what are representatives? These are speech acts that commit a speaker to the truth of the expressed proposition. Well, an example is reciting a creed. Next, directives are speech acts that are to cause the hearer to take a particular action. For example, the case of requests, commands, and advice. Another is commissive. These are speech acts that commit a speaker to some future action like promises and oaths. Next are expressives. These are speech acts that express the speaker's attitudes and emotions towards the proposition, like saying congratulations or excuses and thanks. Declarations are speech acts that change the reality in accord with the proposition of the declaration. For example, in baptisms, pronouncing someone guilty or pronouncing someone husband and wife. Another concept we need to consider when studying pragmatics is the cooperative principle. Cooperative principle describes how effective communication in conversation is achieved in common social situations, like how listeners and speakers must act cooperatively and mutually accept one another to be understood in a particular way. In this case, for a successful communication to take place, Paul Grice advised to make your contribution such as it is required at the stage at which it occurs by the accepted purpose or direction of the talk exchange in which you are engaged. Paul Grice came up with conversational maxims to explain this. There are 4 maxims we have to remember: maxim of quality, maxim of quantity, maxim of relation, and maxim of manner. The maxim of quantity requires that you, first, make your contribution as informative as is required. Second, do not make your contribution more informative than is required. Now we go to maxims of quality, which require that you, first, do not say what you believe to be false. Second, do not say that for which you lack adequate evidence. Now we go to maxim of relation. Be relevant. Then we go to maxims of manner. First, speak clearly. Second, avoid ambiguity. Third, be brief. Fourth, be orderly. When a speaker does not follow the rules of these maxims, we say that he is flouting the maxim. Now, what is the purpose of flouting a maxim? If the flouting of maxims is done for the purpose of getting a conversational implicature, it is usually carried out by means of indirect, contradictory utterances, or figure of speech such as irony, metaphor, overstatement, understatement, tautology, and hyperbole. Whenever a maxim is flouted, there must be an implicature to save the utterance from simply appearing to be a faulty contribution to a conversation. Let's look at the following extract. We can see the exchange between the librarian and the student who is trying to collect books. He tries to confirm if he has any more book to retrieve. The librarian then asks if he was trying to borrow all the books in the library. Of course, given different contexts, we know that this is impossible. But with the librarian trying to flout the maxim of relation, we realize that he is doing this to imply that the student is being pushy by asking for too many books than what is allowable. Now, let's look at an example of flouting the quality maxim. We see in this example that an ambulance picks up a collapsed drunkard on the sidewalk. Soon, the drunkard vomits all over the paramedic. The paramedic says that it is just, making his Christmas. We know that given the context, that is not true, and he is therefore flouting the maxim of quality. Now, let's look at more examples. In this example, we can see that the speaker is giving more than is required and is therefore flouting the maxim of quantity. When someone calls and we hear an answering machine, it is assumed that there is nobody at home, but the speaker here provides more information than needed. Flouts exploiting the relation maxim can be seen in this extract. It tends to occur when the response is obviously irrelevant to the topic. There is an abrupt change of topic, obvious failure to address the question of the one asking. Here, we can see the daughter avoiding the father's question about her SATs results. We see another conversation here between an American student and a Chinese student. The Chinese student asks about his salary, and the American student does not give an obvious answer and rather avoids this by saying, "Oh no." This example shows cultural differences where Americans avoid or are not comfortable with questions related to salaries, while to a Chinese, it is usually part of their discourse. Flouts exploiting the manner maxim involves the absence of clarity, brevity, and transparency of communicative intentions. In this example, the interviewer asks about the government's promise to raise teacher salary, but the spokesperson flouts the maxim of manner by giving an indirect and vague answer, seemingly to avoid conflict, since he may not be in a position to provide the real score behind the promise. Another concept we deal with in the study of pragmatics is implicature. An implicature is something that the speaker suggests or implies with an utterance, even though it is not literally expressed. An implicature is something the speaker suggests or implies with an utterance, even though it is not literally expressed. Let's take this example. Lisa's utterance is literally a request for information on the nature of the liquor, yet Jason interprets it as a request for a drink. Nothing in the literal meaning of Lisa's utterance could lead Jason to that interpretation, which can only be derived by means of conversational implicature. And lastly, let's talk about politeness theory. This theory was developed by Brown and Levinson. The theory accounts for politeness in terms of the redressing of affronts to a person's sociological face by face-threatening acts. Politeness assumes that we all have face, and we all have face wants and needs. Further, there are different types of face threatened in various face-threatening acts, and sometimes the face threats are to the hearer, while other times they are to the speaker. The weight of a face-threatening act is determined by considering the combination of three variables: power, distance, and rank. Power refers to the perceived power dynamics between speaker and hearer. As a speaker, is the targeted hearer a superior, subordinate, or at about your same social level? Distance refers to the amount of social distance between the speaker and hearer. As a speaker, is the targeted hearer a close friend or a distant colleague? Rank refers to the cultural ranking of the subject, the degree of the sensitivity of the topic within a particular culture. For example, a woman's age and weight are two very sensitive topics within US culture, as is a person's income. While some other cultures don't consider these sensitive topics, but rather matters of fact to be simply shared. Politeness theory relies, in part, on the idea that there are different kinds of face: positive face and negative face. Positive face reflects an individual's need for his or her wishes and desires to be appreciated in a social context. This is the maintenance of a positive and consistent self-image. Negative face, on the other hand, reflects an individual's need for freedom of action, freedom from imposition, and the right to make one's own decisions. Together, these types of face respect the face needs covered previously, which include an individual's face needs for autonomy and competence. This theory relies on the assumption that most speech acts inherently threaten either the speaker or the hearer's face, and that politeness is therefore a necessary component of unoffensive, non-face threatening communication and involves the redressing of positive and negative face. In each of these scenarios, Speaker B is offering a suggestion to Speaker A. Speaker B's intended meaning may or may not be clear to you as you read through this, but hopefully, given the context and their relationship, Speaker A will understand the implications offered by Speaker B. The risk in off-record politeness, of course, is that the implications are so vague that they are not understood as intended. We have just discussed key notions in the analysis of discourse from a pragmatics perspective, from speech acts, cooperative principle, co-texts, implicature, and politeness. That ends Module 3. See you in Module 4 for more.